Arrogant judge wrongfully finds. Black woman, seconds later, regrets everything. The courtroom was heavy with silence, thick like a storm waiting to break. At the center stood Cassandra Hall, a confident black woman in her early 30s. She held herself with calm authority, used to walking into rooms where she wasn't welcomed and making people take notice. But here, in this courtroom, that quiet strength was about to be tested like never before. Seated high on the bench above her was Judge Franklin Dane, a pale, wrinkled man in his late 60s with thinning silver hair and eyes like cold iron. His black robe hung stiffly over his shoulders as if the very weight of power had become a second skin. His expression was blank until he saw Cassandra. Then his lips curled into a sneer, so subtle yet unmistakable it could cut like a razor. The plaque on the front of his bench gleamed. Honorable Franklin Dane, presiding judge. To Cassandra it read, "You have no power here." "Miss Hall," Judge Dane began, voice slow, deliberate, dripping with condescension. "Do you know why you're standing in my courtroom today?" Cassandra's eyes met his without flinching. "Yes, Your Honor. I was cited for allegedly speeding on Highway 17, but I wasn't speeding." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Dane leaned back in his chair, folding his fingers together. "Allegedly," he echoed, amused. "So we're denying facts now." "I'm not denying facts," Cassandra replied, voice steady but sharp. "I'm stating the truth. There were no visible speed limit signs for miles. I was going under 50. The citation claims 70 in a 55 zone. That's not accurate." Judge Dane's smirk returned, this time wider, crueler. He glanced over at the bailiff, a white man in uniform who chuckled under his breath, then turned back to Cassandra. "It's funny," he said, leaning forward slightly, "how people like you always seem to think the rules don't apply to them." The words hit the room like a slap. Cassandra's jaw tightened, her hands clasped behind her back to keep them from shaking. Her gaze didn't break. "People like me?" she asked. Dane gave a theatrical shrug. "Oh, don't play innocent. You come in here with your perfect little suit, your fancy talk, and your smug entitlement, thinking you can out-argue the law, thinking you're above the system." "No, Your Honor," Cassandra said quietly, but every syllable was a blade. "I believe in the system. That's why I'm here, to prove it works." "You want proof?" he barked. "Fine." He slammed his gavel against the bench. Bam! The sound echoed off the marble walls. "The fine stands at $1,000. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Cassandra blinked. $1,000? That's excessive. The standard for that infraction is no more than $250. Dane raised an eyebrow. "Did you just question me?" "I questioned the judgment, not the judge," she answered carefully, her voice still calm. "There are precedents for—" "Enough!" His voice was low now, deadly. "This is my courtroom, not yours. You don't get to walk in here and lecture me on precedent." Another low laugh came from the bailiff. Several spectators, white, middle-aged, smug, exchanged amused looks. A woman in the second row rolled her eyes, muttering something that sounded a lot like, "She thinks she's special." Cassandra stood still, not moving a muscle. But inside, rage flared like a match dropped in oil. She had been in rooms like this her entire life. The courtroom, the boardroom, the classroom, always having to work twice as hard, speak twice as carefully, succeed twice as convincingly, just to be heard. "I'm increasing the fine," Judge Dane said suddenly. "Let's make it $1,500 for wasting this court's time with your attitude." The room erupted. Some gasped, some snickered. Even the court clerk, typing notes with robotic efficiency, looked up in disbelief. Cassandra stood like stone, her spine ramrod straight, her fingers clenched so tightly behind her back, her nails bit into her palms. Dane leaned in again, smug satisfaction oozing from every wrinkle in his face. "Next time, Miss Hall, learn your place." The phrase landed like a hammer. A beat of silence followed. You could hear the flicker of fluorescent lights, the tap of someone's shoe, the subtle breath of an old ceiling vent. Cassandra's lips parted, then closed again. Every instinct in her body screamed to fight back. to unleash her knowledge of the law, to tear down this farce brick by brick. But instead she reached slowly into her purse, pulled out her wallet and stepped forward. "I'll pay the fine," she said. Dane's grin widened like a wolf's. "Smart girl." Cassandra locked eyes with him one last time. There was no trembling in her hands, no shame in her eyes. Only something cold, something steady. She placed the debit card on the clerk's table. The clerk hesitated, glanced at Dane, then processed the payment in silence. Cassandra turned, heels clicking crisply against the polished floor, every step a declaration of defiance. She didn't look back, but as she passed the rows of smirking faces, she memorized them: the bailiff, the clerk, the old white man in the third row who had laughed the loudest. She memorized every face that had stayed silent, every person who had chosen complicity over courage. But while the courtroom had fallen silent, Cassandra's mind hadn't. She left with her head held high, but not in surrender. The fluorescent lights above Cassandra Hall's desk buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the papers strewn before her like the aftermath of a storm. The air in her office felt colder than usual, tighter. Her fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard, unmoving, as if her body was bracing for what her mind was already beginning to suspect. She had just returned from the courthouse, $1,500 lighter, but far heavier in spirit. Judge Franklin Dane's voice still echoed in her ears. Condescending, venomous, unjust. Most people would have walked away, head down, ego bruised. Cassandra didn't. She came back here, and now she was hunting. Her office, tucked away in a quiet corner of the Justice Center's administration floor, wasn't glamorous. Just a desk, a filing cabinet, and a wall of legal books that smelled like dust and deadlines. But Cassandra didn't need luxury. She needed focus. And right now she was locked in like a laser. She pulled up Dane's court records first. Every public ruling, every sentencing, every fine. She started skimming line by line, case by case. At first, nothing screamed corruption, but then a pattern began to take shape. It wasn't in what was said, it was in what wasn't. The fines, so many fines, and all far above the state minimums. Misdemeanors that should have cost people $200, Dane charged $700. Parking violations that averaged $75, he made them $300. Again, and again, and again. Cassandra's jaw tightened. It wasn't just her. He'd been doing this for years. She minimized the case summaries and opened up the court's financial ledger. This was information most people didn't know existed, let alone how to access it. But Cassandra had worked long enough in federal litigation to know where the bodies were buried and how to dig. She scrolled through deposit entries tied to Judge Dane's docket numbers. At first glance, the fines looked legitimate. They were funneled into something called the Court Improvement Fund. Harmless enough. Every district had one, used for things like fixing plumbing or upgrading security cameras. But this fund, Dane's fund, was different. Because the money wasn't going into general infrastructure. It was going into a private sub-account, one that only Judge Dane had access to. Her stomach turned. She clicked deeper into the audit trail. Transaction by transaction, she followed the money, thousands of dollars a week, hundreds of thousands a year, funneled from working-class defendants into a fund that no one questioned because it wore the mask of bureaucracy. She leaned back in her chair, heartbeat thudding in her ears. This wasn't just greed. This was systematic theft, dressed up in legal robes and hidden in plain sight. And it was all targeted. She ran a cross-check using the defendant demographics from his court records. 82% of those charged the highest fines under Judge Dane were Black or Hispanic. Cassandra blinked at the number, stunned. It hit like a slap. The data didn't lie. Dane wasn't just corrupt. He was weaponizing the law against people who looked like her. People without power, without lawyers, without a voice. Cassandra stared at the screen, something inside her twisting hard. The walls of her office seemed to close in for a moment. This wasn't just about the $1,500 he took from her. It wasn't even about the insult, the smirk, or the way the courtroom had laughed as if her pain was entertainment. It was about every single person that man had broken from behind his bench. and no one had stopped him. She reached for her phone, dialing a direct line to a contact in internal oversight. The line rang. Once, twice, then voicemail. "Derek, it's Hall," she said, her voice low but firm. "I need access to Judge Dane's requisition files. I believe he's been laundering fines through an unauthorized improvement fund. Call me back." She hung up, fingers already flying across the keyboard. If Dane was funneling money into a private account, there had to be receipts, vendors, repairs, contracts. She checked court maintenance logs. One line item claimed $10,000 for courtroom bench resurfacing. The invoice was handwritten. No contractor name. No tax ID. No receipt. Fake. She checked another. $15,000 for jury box installation. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago, but Cassandra had sat in that courtroom this morning. There was no new jury box. Every log she checked made the picture clearer. Judge Franklin Dane had been using bogus improvements as cover to siphon taxpayer money, and no one was watching. No one had ever questioned it. The court assumed the judge was trustworthy. Cassandra knew better now. She leaned forward, breathing shallow, adrenaline surging through her veins like wildfire. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. She stared at the screen, the cursor blinking at the bottom of the ledger like a taunt. The room felt hotter now. Her blazer itched at the collar. Sweat prickled behind her ears. She suddenly remembered the face of a teenager she'd seen in Dane's courtroom last year. Barely 16, fined $800 for loitering. His mother had cried in the hallway. Cassandra hadn't thought much of it then. She was working another case, too busy to look deeper. She hadn't known. Now she did. She pushed back from the desk, grabbed a legal pad, and started scribbling everything she'd found. Case numbers, dates, dollar amounts, vendor names, or lack thereof. She filled page after page, her handwriting sharp and fast, fueled by fury. Cassandra Hall's hand hovered over the mouse as she stared at the screen. The cursor blinked, waiting, daring her to confirm the final step. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, her chest tight with the weight of the decision. The report, her meticulously crafted accusation, was ready. She had outlined everything. The missing funds, the overinflated fines, the racial bias in Judge Dane's rulings, all backed up with irrefutable evidence. It was the kind of report that could destroy careers and expose the corruption festering in the heart of the system. One click. That was all it took. Her finger pressed the mouse, and the email was sent. She leaned back in her chair, a cold wave of relief washing over her. For the first time in days, she felt like she had control over something. The truth was out there. The system would have to answer. But what came next was the silence that always follows the storm. Hours passed. No confirmation, no acknowledgement. It was as if her report had vanished into the void. But Cassandra knew better than to believe that. She sat in her small, windowless office, staring at her computer screen. Every minute that ticked by felt like a countdown. And then, just as the office was emptying for the evening, her phone buzzed with an alert. The message was short, but the weight behind it made her stomach twist. "You're needed." Conference Room 9, 7 p.m., SY. Stephen Yates, her supervisor. The man who had once been her mentor. The man who had steered her through the earliest days of her career, who had taught her how to navigate the labyrinth of the legal world. But tonight, he wasn't her ally. He was a gatekeeper, standing between her and the truth she had just set in motion. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt like an eternity. The weight of what was about to happen pressed on her chest. Her mind raced through every possible outcome. She had done everything by the book. She had followed the rules. So why did it feel like she was about to be thrown into the fire? When the elevator doors opened, Cassandra stepped into the long, sterile hallway. The lights flickered overhead, casting shadows on the whitewashed walls. Conference Room 9 was at the end, the door already slightly ajar. As she approached, she could hear the low hum of voices inside. But there was no warmth in the exchange, only tension. She pushed the door open. Yates was already sitting at the head of the long, polished conference table. The room was cold, deliberately so. His suit, as always, was impeccably tailored, but his face was unreadable. The manila folder in front of him was the only thing that seemed to breathe. It was thick, weighty, and Cassandra knew with sick certainty that it was her report, her work, her future, resting in the hands of someone who had the power to bury it all. "Sit," Yates said, his voice clipped. Cassandra didn't hesitate. She sat across from him, her posture stiff but composed. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest, but she wouldn't show it. She had nothing to hide. The truth was on her side. Yates didn't speak at first. He just stared at the folder in front of him, flipping it open slowly, each movement deliberate, methodical. The silence stretched between them like a physical force. Finally, he looked up, meeting her gaze with a sharp, cold stare. "This," he said quietly, "is a problem." "I don't see how," Cassandra replied, her voice steady, though she could feel the burn of his eyes on her. "It's just the truth." "Truth?" Yates's lips curled in something close to a sneer. "You think the truth matters here? The truth is a luxury we don't have the luxury of. You don't walk in here and rock the boat without understanding the consequences." Cassandra felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What consequences?" "The consequences of pulling the rug out from under people who matter," he said, his voice rising now, the mask of professionalism slipping for a moment. "The consequences of accusing a judge, our judge, of corruption, of racial bias. You don't think the system is going to retaliate?" He slammed his hand on the table, making her flinch. "You don't think it's going to come crashing down on you?" Her eyes narrowed. She was done with the games. "I don't care about the system," she said, her voice low but firm. "What matters is what's right." Yates leaned forward, his face now inches from hers, his eyes darkened with something dangerous. "If you still want to be a lawyer tomorrow, you'll stop this. You'll pull the report. You'll pretend this never happened. If you value your career, you'll walk away from this before it costs you everything." For the first time in their conversation, Cassandra's heart skipped. His words weren't a suggestion. They were a threat, unmistakable, chilling. It wasn't just her job on the line. It was her future, her very career. The walls seemed to close in around her. She had never felt more alone. But Cassandra didn't flinch. She didn't look away. "I've spent my whole career in your shadow, Stephen," she said, her voice cold like steel. "But I'm not going to let you or anyone else bury the truth. You can threaten me. You can pull me from cases, but you will not stop me." Yates stood up sharply, his chair scraping against the floor. His face twisted in anger, but it was mixed with something else, something darker. "Then you'll learn the hard way," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm giving you a choice, Cassandra. You can walk away from this now, or you can lose everything." Everything. Cassandra stood as well, her fists clenched at her sides, her mind burning with the weight of the decision. "This isn't over," she said, her voice sharp. "Not by a long shot." Yates just shook his head, a mocking smile curling his lips. "You'll regret this, I promise you." She turned to leave, the door slamming shut behind her. As she walked down the hallway, her heart pounded with fury, but also with something else, determination. Yates thought he could intimidate her, shut her down with threats. But Cassandra Hall wasn't the kind of woman who backed down when the truth was on the line. This was just the beginning. The warning signs came like whispers in the dark, quiet at first, almost dismissible. But Cassandra Hall had spent too long navigating rooms filled with veiled threats and unspoken power plays. She knew the difference between coincidence and intention. And this was no coincidence. It started with Jada, her closest friend, her anchor. Jada had been working inside the courthouse's administrative office for 5 years, sharp, meticulous, and loyal to a fault. She was the one who helped Cassandra discreetly pull old financial records from Judge Dane's office. Without Jada, half the report wouldn't have existed. On a rainy Thursday morning, Cassandra arrived at the courthouse early, only to find Jada's desk stripped bare. No framed photos, no coffee mug, nothing. Just a sealed envelope with her name taped to the chair. Cassandra snatched it, heart racing. Inside, a single sentence in official tone. "Effective immediately, Jada Reynolds' employment has been terminated. No reason, no signature." Jada was gone. Cassandra called her 3 times, no answer. Then once more. On the 4th try, Jada finally picked up, her voice trembling like a violin string pulled too tight. I can't talk, she whispered. They know. Who? Cassandra demanded, already pacing her office. What are you talking about? But the line went dead. That night, Cassandra drove home with her jaw locked, knuckles white against the steering wheel. Rain pelted the windshield like a warning drumbeat. When she reached her apartment building, something felt off. The lobby was too quiet. The security guard who usually greeted her with a nod wasn't at the desk. Her stomach tightened. She climbed the stairs two at a time, keys ready in hand. But when she reached her door, her breath caught in her throat. The lock was broken. She froze. The metal was bent inward, pried open. The frame around the door splintered. She pushed gently, and the door creaked open with a sound that made her skin crawl. The lights were off. The air inside felt disturbed. Cassandra reached for her phone, using the flashlight to scan the room. Her living room had been ransacked. Couch cushions slashed open, drawers pulled out and dumped on the floor. Her bookshelf overturned, papers everywhere. But the worst was in her home office. Her laptop, the one with all the case files, encrypted records and private notes, was lying on the floor, the screen shattered, casing cracked open, hard drive exposed, not stolen, destroyed. She took a shaky step forward, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped animal. Her breathing was shallow now, a whisper on the edge of panic. She backed out of the apartment, hands trembling, and ran to her car. She didn't go inside. She didn't cry. She sat there in the driver's seat, with her fingers frozen around the steering wheel. That's when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She opened the message. Know your place. Stay quiet, or next time it won't be the laptop. Her blood turned to ice. The message wasn't random. It wasn't empty. It was personal, and it was a declaration. We're watching you. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. She paced her kitchen in the dim glow of the stove light, her mind racing. They had taken her friend's job, broken into her home, destroyed her tools, and now they were threatening her directly. This wasn't about evidence anymore. It was warfare. Cassandra realized then that she was no longer part of a legal process. She wasn't filing motions or citing precedent. She was being hunted, silenced, cornered. This was no longer about proving Judge Dane's corruption in court. This was about surviving it. They wanted her afraid. They wanted her to back down. But Cassandra Hall had grown up knowing what fear looked like. She'd seen it in her mother's eyes when bills went unpaid, in her own reflection the first time a teacher accused her of cheating because she wrote too well. She had learned to wear fear like armor and keep moving anyway. Now that armor would be tested. The next morning, Cassandra didn't report the break-in. Not to local police, not to courthouse security. She knew better. If this was coming from inside the system, reporting it would do nothing but alert them that she was still fighting. Instead, she encrypted what files she had left, backed up her remaining data on a secure server, and bought a new phone with a fresh number. Then she packed a small bag and moved into a motel 3 neighborhoods away. Temporary, untraceable. She needed space, time, and a new plan. Because if they wanted a war, they had just picked the wrong woman to threaten. Later that night, Cassandra sat in that dimly lit motel room, her new laptop glowing in the dark. She stared at the screen for a long time, not typing, just thinking. Jada was silenced. Her home had been invaded, her work destroyed, her life threatened. But something burned behind her eyes, a fire that hadn't dimmed. If anything, it burned brighter. They were trying to break her, but all they had done was show her exactly how deep the rot went. And now she wouldn't stop until she ripped every piece of it out, root and all. It was well past midnight when Cassandra Hall entered the dimly lit parking garage beneath an abandoned municipal building downtown. The concrete echoed with each of her footsteps, and the air smelled of motor oil and silence. She had driven in circles for hours before settling on this location. Off-grid, untraceable, and forgotten by the city. She needed a place where eyes wouldn't follow her. Because tonight she wasn't just meeting anyone, she was meeting Leon Carter, FBI special agent, corruption hunter, ghost to the system. She'd read about him in case files, an agent known for taking down dirty mayors, laundering judges, and entire webs of political rot. Carter wasn't just effective. He was ruthless when it came to justice. And now he was her last hope. Cassandra spotted him leaning against a pillar in the far corner, partially swallowed by shadow. Dressed in a simple black hoodie, hands tucked into his jacket, he looked more like a street fighter than a federal agent. But the second their eyes met, she saw it. The calculation, the awareness, the readiness to move at the first hint of danger. "You, Hall?" he asked, voice low, sharp. She nodded. "You, Carter?" He pushed off the wall and approached with slow, steady steps. "I heard you stirred up a hornet's nest." "I think I stepped on a beehive with a baseball bat," she said, handing him a flash drive. "Dane's only the tip of it. He's protected, connected, and someone's already tried to shut me down, hard." Carter took the drive without looking at it. "I've heard of Dane. Quiet rumors. Never anything solid." "Now you've got something solid," she replied. "Financial fraud, racial targeting, illegal funneling of public funds. I've got timelines, fake contractors, payout patterns, enough to bury him." "Yeah," Carter said, "and if he's still walking around free, it means someone's making sure he stays that way." He pocketed the drive, then glanced over his shoulder toward the entrance. No one was there, but his eyes kept scanning. Cassandra followed his gaze. Every shadow now felt like a threat. "They broke into my apartment," she said quietly. "Smashed everything. Destroyed my laptop. Sent a message. Stay quiet or else." Carter's jaw tightened. "That's not fear tactics. That's a warning shot." "I know," she said. "That's why I came to you. I can't go through channels anymore. The system's infected." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we do this off book." Cassandra exhaled, the tension in her chest only loosening slightly. "What does that look like?" "A ghost investigation," Carter said. "No paper trail, no agency memos, no tech on the grid. Only people we trust. Small team. You and me for now." He pulled out a burner phone and handed it to her. "Encrypted. Don't use your regular number again. Ever." She took it without hesitation. "What's the plan?" "First," he said, "we trace the money. Quietly. If Dane's laundering court fines, we find the shell companies and follow them up the food chain. Second, we start looking at the judge's inner circle. Who's protecting him? Who's helping him move the money? And third," he paused, "we prepare for retaliation, because once they realize we're not playing by the rules, they'll come after us." Cassandra nodded, her voice hard. "Let them." But even as she said it, the gravity of what they were doing settled deeper into her bones. This wasn't a legal battle anymore. It was espionage, whistleblowing in enemy territory. She was teaming up with a federal agent to take on not just a corrupt judge, but an entire structure designed to protect men like him. "We'll need a safe house," Carter said, already planning aloud. "Secure communications, a firewall between our lives and our investigation." "I have one," Cassandra replied. "Outskirts of the city. No Wi-Fi. No neighbors." Carter smirked. "I like you already." They parted ways 10 minutes later. No handshakes, no goodbyes. Just the quiet agreement of two people who knew the stakes. Cassandra climbed back into her car and pulled away slowly, every headlight in the rearview mirror now a potential threat. As the city blurred around her, she realized something chilling. She wasn't investigating injustice anymore. She was at war with it. What started as a single judge's corruption was beginning to unravel into something far more sinister. The deeper Cassandra Hall and Agent Leon Carter dug, the more grotesque the truth became. It started with a spreadsheet, just names, dates, case numbers. A list Carter had quietly pulled from a sealed courthouse database using an access key only senior federal agents possessed. It was meant to be a sample, a random slice of court records from Judge Franklin Dane's docket over the past 4 years. But nothing in that file was random. They spent days cross-referencing names, comparing charges, fine amounts, sentencing decisions, and demographic data. The pattern wasn't just alarming, it was surgical. 85% of the defendants who received maximum penalties under Judge Dane were people of color, African Americans, Latinos, first-time offenders receiving excessive fines. Non-violent defendants handed down jail time. Young black men being sentenced for misdemeanors that other judges dismissed with a warning. It wasn't incompetence, it was intent. And then came the cross-court links. Leon pulled court records from neighboring jurisdictions, judges who, on paper, had no connection to Dane. But when Cassandra began tracking the fines, she noticed something eerie. The same court improvement funds, worded the same way, processed through the same regional bank, hidden under nearly identical shell companies. Each judge had their own improvement project. Each judge had their own inflated fines. And all of them, every single one, targeted the same kinds of defendants. It wasn't just Dane, it was a network. Cassandra felt the breath leave her lungs as the realization sank in. This wasn't a lone corrupt judge lining his pockets in the dark. This was a coordinated operation, judges, clerks, and lawyers feeding a system designed to exploit, to profit, to oppress. They pulled more files. Carter tapped into old DOJ memos, internal audits that had never gone public. Cassandra accessed sealed transcripts using the clearance Carter gave her. It was all there, a constellation of injustice, drawn in blood and silence. In one case, a 19-year-old named Marcus DeWitt had been sentenced to 6 months in jail for disturbing the peace after defending himself during a wrongful traffic stop. The officer's body cam footage had conveniently gone missing. The judge on the case, not Dane, but someone tied to the same financial patterns. Another file showed a single mother arrested for failure to appear when her court date had been rescheduled without notification. She lost custody of her children. The presiding judge, also on the payroll of a shell company linked to urban courthouse modernization. These weren't isolated tragedies. They were deliberate outcomes. And Cassandra's rage grew with every name, every ruined life, every unchecked abuse. The weight of it threatened to crush her, but it also sharpened her purpose into something razor-edged. They mapped it all out on a wall in the safe house. Photos, strings, documents, arrows connecting counties, judges, banks, and LLCs. Carter pinned a new name every time they found another connection, and then they found the name that made everything fall into place. Senator Curtis Langford. He sat on the Judicial Oversight Committee, publicly hailed as a reformer. Privately, he'd received campaign contributions from the very development firms funding these court improvement projects. His fingerprints were all over the legislative backchannels that quietly approved funding, boosts to courthouses in the targeted districts. On paper, it looked like progress. In reality, it was a smokescreen for systemic exploitation. Langford didn't just know about the network, he helped create it. Carter stood in silence as Cassandra read the last memo aloud. An internal email from Langford's office to a courthouse administrator authorizing a pilot program that allowed local judges to exercise independent discretion on minor offenses to reduce caseload. Discretion. That was the word they used to criminalize poverty. Cassandra sat down, her hands shaking slightly. "How many lives?" she whispered. Carter didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the wall said it all. Dozens of names, hundreds of faces, stories no one cared to hear. People the system had steamrolled, under the guise of justice. "This isn't a court scandal," Cassandra said, voice low, trembling. "This is a machine." "And Langford's the engine," Carter replied. They sat in silence, the reality sinking in like poison. Going after Dane was one thing, but Langford, a sitting U.S. senator with national reach, political cover, and access to the highest corridors of power? That wasn't a courtroom battle. That was suicide, unless they were ready to burn the whole thing down. Carter finally spoke. "If we do this, there's no going back. You're not just exposing a judge. You're threatening people who think they own the system." Cassandra looked at him, fire in her eyes. "They don't own me." That night, Cassandra drove alone to the heart of D.C. No safe house. No shadows. Just herself, in a plain black coat, standing at the foot of the most iconic building in the country, the Capitol. It towered above her, lit like a monument, majestic and hollow. She stared at it for a long time, not with awe, with fury, because somewhere inside that dome, powerful men in tailored suits were orchestrating injustice with a smile, wearing flags on their lapels while stealing futures from the people who believed in justice. Cassandra Hall had spent her life fighting for that belief. But now she was ready to fight against the lie it had become. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. The room was packed wall to wall with cameras, microphones, and a sea of skeptical faces. Journalists whispered behind lifted notepads. Photographers adjusted lenses with fingers itching for a headline-worthy shot. At the center of it all stood Cassandra Hall, calm in appearance, fire in her veins. Her navy suit was immaculate, but beneath the composed exterior, her heart pounded like a war drum. The podium in front of her bore the seal of the U.S. Attorney's Office. But this wasn't a government press briefing. This was a calculated strike aimed at the rotting core of the justice system. Thank you all for coming, Cassandra began, her voice steady but sharp. Today I will present evidence of criminal misconduct and systemic abuse perpetrated by a sitting judge, Franklin Dane. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She continued without pause. This is not an accusation. This is a presentation of proof. With one motion, she signaled to the screen behind her. It flickered to life, revealing a meticulously crafted slideshow. Bank statements, forged contracts, photos of cash deposits, falsified expense reports. Every frame stabbed at Dane's carefully constructed mask of integrity. Judge Dane orchestrated an illegal operation that siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars from inflated fines and funneled them into personal accounts. He targeted Black and Latino defendants disproportionately, using his bench as a tool of oppression. Whispers rose in volume. The story was too big to ignore now. Cassandra didn't stop there. She clicked to the final slide, a direct email link between Judge Dane and an entity named Langford Holdings, LLC, a development shell connected to Senator Curtis Langford. The room fell silent. Cassandra let the weight of the moment hang in the air. This wasn't a rogue judge, she said coldly. This was a network. Then the doors slammed open. Federal agents filed in. Black suits, stone faces. The cameras swiveled. At the back of the room, Judge Franklin Dane stood against the wall. Expression unreadable, arms folded. Two agents approached, presenting a warrant. Judge Dane, one said, you are under arrest for fraud, abuse of power, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Handcuffs clicked. Flashes exploded like lightning as Dane was led forward, his face bathed in the strobe of shame. But then, he smiled, a slow, smug smile. As the cameras crowded in, he turned to Cassandra and said loud enough for every mic to catch, "You think this is victory? You've barely scratched the surface. And you have no idea who you're really up against." The words hit like a slap, but Cassandra held his gaze, refusing to blink. Until the storm hit her. Within 24 hours, the backlash began. A letter arrived on her desk from the Department of Justice. You are hereby suspended pending investigation for breach of internal protocol, unauthorized disclosure of classified records, and potential violation of privacy laws. It didn't matter that the records exposed criminal behavior. She had made the mistake of exposing the wrong people. Her email account was locked. Her badge revoked. She had been cast out, just like that. And worse, the media had turned. Articles appeared online within hours. Rogue prosecutor goes public without authorization. Whistleblower or glory seeker? Cassandra Hall, hero or hacker? On social media, the vitriol was worse. Another angry Black woman trying to burn the system down. She leaked sensitive data. She should be in jail too. Typical race card politics. Each comment felt like a knife. She sat in her dark apartment, blinds closed, phone off, laptop shut. Her career was in ruins. The people she thought would stand with her had vanished. And for the first time since this all began, Cassandra broke. She sobbed until her throat hurt, until her hands shook, until she felt like she was dissolving into the very silence they had tried to force on her. That night, she drove in a daze to the only place that still felt safe, her mother's house. The porch light was on. Patricia Hall opened the door before Cassandra could even knock. No words were needed. She wrapped her daughter in a hug, tight and unflinching, like she'd known this moment was coming. Later, sitting at the kitchen table, Cassandra stared at her untouched tea. "I tried, Mama," she whispered. "I tried to do the right thing, and they destroyed me." Patricia looked at her daughter with eyes full of history, eyes that had watched the world spit on people who told the truth. "You didn't do the wrong thing, Cassandra," she said quietly. "You just did the dangerous thing." "I'm not sure I can keep going," Cassandra admitted, voice cracking. Patricia reached across the table and took her hand. "Baby, you were not born to be silent. You were born to fight." Cassandra stared at her for a long moment, and slowly something shifted. She didn't feel strong yet, but she felt clear. Later that night, as the city hummed under a silver moon, Cassandra stood outside alone. In the distance, lit against the night sky, stood the United States Capitol, majestic, untouchable, corrupt to the bone. She stared at it like a soldier might stare at an enemy fortress, measuring its walls, memorizing its weak points. Judge Dane was only the beginning. If the system wanted war, she would bring it, even if it meant going to war with a senator, because Cassandra Hall had nothing left to lose. Just when Cassandra thought she was out of options, the truth came knocking, wearing fear in its eyes and carrying the kind of evidence that could bring an empire to its knees. Her name was Rachel Carter, and what she held would change everything. The rain had turned to mist by the time Rachel Carter stepped into the shadowed alley behind the old library on 12th Street. She wore a long gray coat, her hood pulled low, her gloved hands trembling slightly as she clutched a worn leather satchel. Her eyes scanned the darkness, every footstep making her flinch. The air was thick with tension, the kind you could taste. Cassandra Hall was already there, standing beneath a flickering security light that buzzed like a dying insect. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. But the moment she saw Rachel, her posture shifted, tense but open. They were both women who had seen too much and trusted too few. "You came alone?" Rachel asked. Cassandra nodded. "Always do now." Rachel exhaled, then slowly pulled a small silver USB drive from her coat. "I've been holding on to this for months," she said. "Didn't know who to give it to. Didn't know who I could trust." "What's on it?" Cassandra asked, already reaching for the drive. Rachel hesitated, then pressed it into her palm. "Proof. Names, transactions, correspondence, everything." Cassandra's grip tightened. "You worked with Judge Dane?" she asked. Rachel gave a sad smile. "I worked with all of them. Dane, Briggs, Holloway, even Richter over in Southfield. I was just a clerk, typing transcripts, filing motions. But I saw things, and I started saving copies, just in case." Cassandra's pulse quickened. "And you think this will hold up?" Rachel's eyes hardened. "It doesn't just hold up, it burns down the house." Back in the safe house, Cassandra inserted the drive into her encrypted laptop, and the screen lit up with a list of files too organized, too clean, to be random. Rachel had built a digital time bomb. Cassandra opened the first folder, Vorn, internal. The name sent a chill down her spine. Gideon Vorn, billionaire, tech mogul, philanthropist, publicly known for funding justice reform campaigns across the country. Privately, Cassandra had always felt something about him was off. His fingerprints had shown up in too many of the court improvement funds tied to Dane's corruption. But until now, she'd had no solid proof of involvement. The documents on the USB shattered that wall. Hundreds of emails between Vorn's advisors and courthouse administrators, state auditors, even sitting judges. The tone was subtle but chilling. Suggestions to prioritize deterrent sentencing in districts with elevated risk demographics. Financial incentives for judges who consistently issued maximum fines. Code words for targeting people of color. Cassandra opened a spreadsheet labeled Performance Metrics. Her stomach dropped. Each row listed a judge's name, the percentage of minority defendants in their courtroom, and their average fine per case. Next to each name was a number, a payout figure. Rachel had told the truth. This was a systemic operation, not just corruption, but commodified punishment. Judges were being rewarded for exploiting communities that couldn't fight back. And Vorn? He was orchestrating it. The deeper she went, the more horrifying it became. Another folder titled Black Line Protocols revealed a clandestine network of shell companies laundering the money from these court fines. It was a well-oiled machine. Local courts issued excessive fines to poor, mostly minority defendants. The fines were routed into court renovation slush funds. Those funds were funneled into Vaughan-owned LLCs posing as contractors. Vaughan converted them into political donations, lobbying credits, and offshore transfers. It was judicial capitalism in its purest, ugliest form. Justice for sale. Cassandra sat frozen, eyes locked on the screen. Every part of her wanted to scream, to throw something, to call someone. But who could she trust? The DOJ had already tried to silence her. The media had turned. And now with this new evidence, she realized the rot went higher than she'd ever imagined. She opened a folder labeled Confidential Internal Notes. And there it was. Senator Curtis Langford, confirmed recipient of Vaughan-backed Super PAC donations. Authorization granted for extended sentencing trials in Districts 4, 7, and 12. Cassandra stared at the line until it blurred. The man sitting on the Judicial Oversight Committee wasn't just complicit, he was on payroll. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just about rigged trials, it was about mass exploitation, sanctioned at the highest levels of government. They weren't just trying to silence her because of Dane. They were trying to protect the empire Vaughan had built, on the backs of the marginalized, the voiceless, the condemned. Rachel walked in with a steaming mug of coffee and placed it gently on the table. Cassandra looked up. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "This is genocide by paperwork," Rachel nodded solemnly, "and they've gotten away with it for years." The silence stretched. Cassandra closed the laptop slowly, her jaw clenched tight, eyes blazing with something new. Not just fury, not just pain, resolve. "You've risked everything by giving this to me," she said. "They'll come after you." "I know," Rachel replied, "but they're already coming after you, and someone has to survive long enough to expose them." Cassandra stood, her heart pounding, her entire body electric with adrenaline. Her mind raced through possibilities. What to release, who to contact, how to protect Rachel, how to stay alive. But one thing was crystal clear now. Vaughan wasn't untouchable, and neither was Langford. Cassandra stepped outside into the night, the USB drive still in her pocket, clutched like a weapon. The city lights flickered against low-hanging clouds. Somewhere in the distance, power brokers sat comfortably behind layers of protection, convinced their secrets were safe. But now those secrets were hers, and she would tear down the walls hiding them, no matter what it cost. For a brief moment, Cassandra thought they were gaining ground. The evidence was solid. The truth was spreading. But in a war this dirty, victories come at a cost, and the enemy had just made their next move. The message came at 3:17 a.m., a single line of text glowing on Cassandra Hall's burner phone. "She's gone." They took her. No name, no sender. But she didn't need one. Rachel. Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers went cold around the phone. Just hours ago, Rachel had sent her a follow-up file. More damning records, deeper links between Vaughan and his judicial puppets. And now she had vanished. Cassandra was already grabbing her keys, heart pounding like gunfire in her chest. 30 minutes later, she was in the FBI's underground command center with Agent Leon Carter, pacing as surveillance feeds flickered across the wall-mounted screens. He stood rigid, jaw tight, earpiece pressed in. "We traced her phone's last ping," he said. "Abandoned warehouse. Dockside District. No movement since 2 a.m. Cassandra's eyes burned with fury. "She trusted me," Carter nodded grimly. "And they're trying to make you regret it." The SWAT van rumbled down darkened streets like a metal predator. Cassandra sat in the back with Carter, armored agents loading weapons beside them. She wore a bulletproof vest over her shirt, her hands balled into fists. "She's alive," she whispered to herself. "She has to be." Carter looked at her. "They know she gave you something." "They want to silence her," Cassandra said, "and send me a message." "No," Carter replied. "They want to end the story before it ever reaches a courtroom." The van screeched to a stop outside a rusted-out warehouse shrouded in fog. The team fanned out, silent and swift, moving like shadows. Carter raised a fist. "Wait, then go." The breach was instant. Bang! Bang! Boom! Flashbangs erupted inside the building, followed by a chorus of shouted commands. Cassandra followed Carter through the breach, stepping over broken pallets and scattered tools. The place reeked of oil and mildew. Gunfire cracked in the distance. 2, maybe 3 shots. Then silence. "Clear!" someone shouted. "Down this way!" Carter barked, already sprinting toward a rear room. Cassandra was right behind him, breath ragged. They kicked open the door. Rachel was there, tied to a chair, bruised and bloodied, but conscious. Duct tape had covered her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror. Cassandra rushed to her, ripping the tape away and cutting the ropes. "You're okay," she whispered, cradling her friend. "I've got you." Rachel trembled in her arms. "They knew everything," she choked. "Vorn. They said Vorn sent them." Carter's radio crackled. "Target fled. SUV out back. They left in a rush. Looks like they got spooked." Cassandra looked up. "Then we hit too soon." "No," Carter said. "We hit just in time." Rachel was rushed to a safe facility under federal protection. Medics confirmed no permanent injuries, but the bruises spoke volumes. Her voice was hoarse, her body weak, but her mind was intact. So was her testimony. Back at the safe house, Cassandra sat in silence. The room was dim, the only light from a desk lamp illuminating a spread of court documents, evidence photos, and USB drives. The weight of it all sat heavy on her shoulders. Vorn knew. He had moved. Rachel's abduction wasn't just retaliation, it was confirmation. The billionaire now understood just how close Cassandra was to dismantling everything he'd built, and he wouldn't make the same mistake again. Across town, in a penthouse office overlooking the city skyline, Gideon Bourne sat in a leather chair, one hand swirling a glass of aged whiskey, the other resting on a sleek silver phone. A large TV played muted news coverage of Rachel's rescue. His jaw tensed as the footage showed Cassandra walking out of the warehouse, arms wrapped protectively around the clerk he'd tried and failed to erase. "Persistent," he muttered. He turned the TV off with a flick of his finger. The door behind him opened silently. A man in black stepped inside. No words, just presence. Clean-shaven, lean, eyes like razors, a ghost who dealt in finalities. Vorn didn't turn around. He simply spoke, his voice smooth and cold. "She has the files, the witnesses, the attention." A pause. "She's setting the stage for a hearing, possibly federal." Another pause. "I want that hearing buried." The man remained silent, waiting. Vorn finally turned, locking eyes with him. "Erase her before it begins." The assassin gave a slight nod, and just like that, he vanished. Back at the safe house, Cassandra watched over Rachel as she slept on a medical cot. Her chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. She looked peaceful, but Cassandra knew better. There was no peace left in this war. Not until the men who built their empires on silence and blood were dragged into the light. And somewhere out there, a killer had just been unleashed, with her name at the top of the list. The message came in a sleek black envelope marked with the official seal of the United States Department of Justice. Inside was a one-page letter, polite, professional, and cold as ice. "Effective immediately, you are hereby instructed to cease all further investigation into matters involving Judge Franklin Dane, Gideon Vorn, or associated parties. No further evidence shall be disclosed publicly. Violation of this directive may result in legal consequences, including termination of security clearance and prosecution under federal code." No explanation, no justification, just power, tightening its grip. Cassandra Hall read the letter twice, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from rage. They weren't even pretending anymore. After everything she had uncovered, the corruption, the laundering, the systemic abuse, they wanted it buried, and they wanted her silenced. Agent Leon Carter confirmed it that same afternoon. "We've been pulled off," he said bitterly, tossing his badge on the table. "DOJ override. Higher-ups just shut down our authority. No warrants, no raids, no subpoenas. They're freezing everything." "And Rachel?" Cassandra asked, heart sinking. Carter hesitated. "They've put her into forced witness protection. Anonymous. No press. No testimony. They're gagging the only voice we have." Cassandra stared at him, jaw clenched. They think if they erase her name, they erase her truth. They're trying to make sure this never reaches the public. Silence fell over the room, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just obstruction. It was sabotage from within. The very people sworn to uphold justice were now protecting criminals at the highest levels. Cassandra stood slowly, a fire building behind her eyes. Then we go around them. Carter blinked. Around who? Everyone, she said. If they won't let us expose the truth in court, then we expose it where they can't control it, in front of the entire country. 2 days later, a mysterious press release shook the media cycle. Public hearing on systemic judicial corruption. Live streamed nationwide. Witnesses, evidence. Truth, Cassandra didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for clearance. She secured a neutral federal hearing space with help from a retired judge who owed her a favor. She invited activists, attorneys, ex-defendants, whistleblowers, and most importantly, she invited cameras. Broadcast trucks lined up around the building. C-SPAN cleared the schedule. YouTube and Twitch simulcasted the stream. America tuned in, not expecting a war. But that's what they got. Cassandra took the podium at 9 a.m. sharp. Dressed in black, eyes fierce, her voice cut through the silence like steel. Today, she began, we are done whispering in the dark. She held up a flash drive. This contains over 500 documents, recordings, and financial records detailing a decades-long network of corruption involving judges, political donors, and private corporations, led by a man named Gideon Vaughan. Murmurs erupted across the gallery. She continued, fearless. This is not an accusation. It is a presentation of fact. She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up. Bank statements, LLC transfers, secret campaign donations, sentencing charts, each image more damning than the last. The cameras zoomed in. The audience gasped. She played audio clips. Vaughan's advisors coaching judges on minority deterrence sentencing and private calls discussing financial returns on urban compliance zones. Then came the final blow, a video of a hidden camera inside a luxury boardroom. Vaughan himself laughing, drink in hand. You squeeze poor communities through the courts. Fines, jail time, fees. You think they'll fight back? Please. They're too busy trying to survive. The room went dead silent. Then Cassandra dropped the final hammer. A detailed timeline of Vaughan's offshore laundering routes, complete with bank account numbers, timestamps, and personal authorizations. She looked directly into the lens. This is what happens when justice is sold to the highest bidder. Just as she stepped down from the podium, the doors to the chamber burst open. FBI agents entered, this time not to stop her, but to act. They moved fast. Gideon Vaughan, who had been sitting in the audience flanked by his lawyers, stood slowly, trying to look composed. But when they presented the arrest warrant, signed under public pressure and congressional demand, his face paled. He stood, then smirked. This is political theater. But the agent said coldly, it's over. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists. Cameras rolled. The country watched it live. And for the first time in Cassandra's long, bloody battle, the monster was in chains. The fallout was instant. News outlets exploded. Headlines flooded every screen. Billionaire Gideon Vaughan arrested in live corruption hearing. Whistleblower Cassandra Hall Sparks, federal investigation into judicial system. Senators, judges under scrutiny following public bombshell. In the days that followed, dozens of judges were suspended pending investigation. Several resigned outright. Congressional committees were formed. Internal DOJ leadership faced audits. But most powerful of all, the people rose. Thousands of former defendants, mostly Black and Latino, began posting videos, testimonies, and court transcripts. Social media surged with hashtags like #Justice was sold and #Cassandra was right. Protests erupted. Demands for reform echoed through city halls and capitals alike. Cassandra stood in the middle of it all, tired, bruised, but unshaken. She hadn't just won. She had ignited a movement, and somewhere deep inside the Justice Department, buried in silence and marble, they knew. They couldn't unsee what she had shown them, because Cassandra Hall had proven something undeniable. You can threaten the truth, you can bury it, but you cannot kill it. Not when someone is finally brave enough to speak it out loud. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. 1 year later, the room was silent as Cassandra Hall stepped into the chamber of the United States Capitol. The walls rose high around her, the polished oak and marble floors echoing every deliberate step. She wore a black suit, sharp, simple, and uncompromising. Her presence turned heads not because of style, but because of what she had survived. Before her sat the Senate Judiciary Committee. Powerful men and women lined the curved dais, their expressions unreadable. Cameras rolled in the background, broadcasting live across the country. Everyone knew her name now. Some revered it. Others feared it. But Cassandra wasn't here to be admired. She was here to speak truth to power. "Miss Hall," a senior senator said, folding his hands over a thick stack of documents, "you've submitted evidence of over 40 convictions overturned due to corrupt sentencing practices linked to the Vaughan judicial network. That alone would justify a lifetime of work." She nodded once. The senator continued, "But you didn't stop at Vaughan. You went after judges, legislators, funders, even members of this very body. You put your life at risk, your career. You were threatened, discredited, even nearly killed." He leaned forward slightly, pausing. "So tell me, Miss Hall, why didn't you just walk away?" The room was dead still. Cassandra let the silence linger before answering. Her voice, when it came, was clear and unwavering. "Because if I had stayed silent," she said, "there would still be thousands of people, black, poor, forgotten, being crushed under a system designed to exploit them. I didn't speak up because I wanted to. I spoke up because I had to." Cameras clicked. Pens stopped moving. Even the senator sat a little straighter. She continued, her tone rising with quiet conviction. "Justice was never blind. It just learned to look the other way. We gave unchecked power to the people who were supposed to protect us, and they used it to build empires on the backs of the vulnerable. I saw it. I lived it. And I refused to let it keep happening." A murmur moved through the chamber. Not disapproval, respect. Cassandra didn't flinch. She had walked through hell, been hunted, gagged, targeted, and yet she had never stopped moving forward. Now she stood before the very institution that once tried to shut her down and told them the truth to their faces. The hearing lasted 4 more hours. She answered questions, clarified data, cited reports, but nothing struck deeper than her opening words. By sundown, every major news outlet had published her quote as their headline. "If I stayed silent, the injustice would never stop." That night, Cassandra didn't go home to speeches or spotlights. She went to a small cafe on the corner of 5th and Mercer, one she'd visited often before her name became national news. The owner still remembered her order: black coffee, no sugar, just the way she liked it. She took a quiet seat by the window. Outside, the city pulsed with life, sirens, horns, voices. But inside the cafe, time felt still. The television behind the counter was tuned to the evening news. Cassandra didn't need to turn around. The sound was enough. Gideon Vaughan sentenced to 37 years in federal prison for conspiracy, judicial tampering, and financial fraud. 3 federal judges implicated in the Vaughan network received 20 to 25-year sentences. Former Senator Curtis Langford found guilty of obstruction of justice, disbarred and sentenced to 18 years behind bars. The barista turned the volume up. One anchor's voice cut clearly through the air. And it all began with one woman who refused to be silenced. Cassandra sipped her coffee. No applause followed, no confetti, no parade, just the bitter warmth of coffee in her throat and the quiet hum of a city still healing. She didn't smile out of pride, not for victory, not for revenge, but because, against all odds, justice had survived. And as long as it lived, even bruised, even imperfect, so would she. Because Cassandra Hall hadn't just exposed a conspiracy. She'd reminded the world that even in the darkest corners of power, truth still had a voice, and that voice could not be silenced. If this story hit you deep, if Cassandra's fight made your heart race, your fists clench, and your hope come alive, don't just scroll past. Like this video to stand with those who speak truth to power. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that expose injustice, celebrate courage, and remind us that even one voice can shake the system. And most importantly, share this story with your friends, your family, your community, because silence protects the powerful, but truth spreads when you speak up. At Emotional Journey, we bring you stories that don't just entertain, they awaken. So if this story moved you, don't let it end here. Tap like, hit subscribe, be part of something bigger, because justice lives when we keep telling the truth, together. Judge calls Black woman unqualified, then she stuns the court with her legal genius. The oak-paneled courtroom was suffocating, not because of the heat, though the fluorescent lights hummed harshly above, but because of the weight in the air. It pressed down on every shoulder, twisted in every breath, and vibrated beneath every shoe tapping against the polished tile floor. But nothing was heavier than the silence that fell after Judge Leon Whitmore slammed his gavel down and said the words that shattered everything. "You are not qualified to be here," he barked, his voice slicing through the stillness like a blade through silk. "This courtroom is no place for amateur theatrics or social experiments." Gas rippled through the audience. One juror's hand twitched at his tie. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. Somewhere in the back, someone snorted, loud enough to be heard, soft enough to pretend it wasn't intentional. But Maya Jennings didn't flinch. She stood alone at the defense table, spine straight, her breath caught just below her rib cage like a clenched fist. Her hands, clasped tightly in front of her, trembled only slightly, barely enough to notice. Her eyes were dry, but behind them was a storm ready to explode. 1,000 hours of study, 1,000 nights of sleepless research, 1,000 rejections, each one overcome with grit and steel. But now one sentence from a man in robes and entitlement had dragged her down like a noose around her name. "Your Honor," she said, her voice level but tight, "I've been admitted to this court by the bar. My qualifications are on file." Judge Whitmore's lip curled as he leaned forward. "The bar may have let you through, Miss Jennings, but this courtroom is built on standards, not charity, and quite frankly," he let the silence build, as if letting the gavel of humiliation swing freely in the air. "I don't know how you got past security." Laughter erupted, not from everyone, but from enough of them. The prosecutor, Marcus Lowell, smirked openly, arms folded, confidence dripping like oil. A bailiff coughed behind his hand. Someone whispered something about affirmative action near the back, and it ignited a ripple of quiet, stifled amusement. Maya blinked once, hard. She would not cry, not now, not here, not for them. She shifted her gaze to the man sitting beside her at the table. Eric DeWitt, her client, her reason for standing in this toxic chamber. A Black man in his 40s, shoulders slumped not from guilt, but from exhaustion. His eyes met hers with the quiet desperation of a man who'd already been found guilty by society long before he stepped into court. He hadn't said a word since the trial began, not out of silence, but out of survival. The state claimed Eric had embezzled over $300,000 from his position as operations manager at a mid-sized logistics firm. The evidence? A handful of electronic transfers, logged under his name, but from an unsecured system anyone could have accessed. The reality? Eric had flagged inconsistencies weeks before the accusation, and days later he was escorted out by security. No warning, no hearing, no explanation. Maya had taken his case pro bono, not because he couldn't afford representation, though that was true, but because something about his story rang too familiar. Her own father had once stood in a courtroom like this, wearing the same expression, that look that said, "They're not interested in the truth. They're here to bury me." The judge tapped his gavel again, this time with less ceremony. "Miss Jennings, this court does not have time to entertain what I can only describe as a poor imitation of legal competence. Your objections are sloppy, Your motion filings are riddled with amateur mistakes, and your presence is, frankly, an insult to this process." Maya opened her mouth, but no words came. Not yet. Her heart thudded in her ears like the distant sound of war drums. But she wouldn't march into rage. Not on his terms. "I respectfully object to this personal attack, Your Honor," she said, steadier this time. "My motions are within procedure. My filings were submitted on time. If there are mistakes, I'm happy to address them." "You can address them," Judge Whitmore sneered, "by taking a remedial course. Or better yet, finding a different profession." Maya's fist clenched at her sides. She could feel every eye in the room on her, some sympathetic, some amused, most indifferent, but she stood firm. Because if she sat down now, if she let this moment pass unanswered, she wasn't just failing herself. She was failing Eric, and every client who would come after him. Every young black girl watching this broadcast who dared dream of standing where Maya stood. She stepped forward. Judge Whitmore narrowed his eyes. "That's enough, Miss Jennings." Maya didn't blink. "No, it's not. Not until this court acknowledges that Eric DeWitt has the right to a defense. Not a defense you approve of, not a defense you prefer, but a defense guaranteed to him under the Constitution." Low murmurs broke out. Even Marcus Lowell shifted in his seat, his smirk twitching at the edges. "You are walking a dangerous line," the judge warned. "So is every person who's ever stood up to injustice in this room," Maya shot back. But just when Maya thought the worst had passed, that the judge's insult would be the harshest blow she'd endure, the system struck again. And this time, it didn't just try to humiliate her. It tried to erase her entirely. The clock struck 11:47 a.m. when the atmosphere in courtroom 3A shifted from tense to volatile. What had once been a procedural cross-examination was now unraveling into something darker, something uglier. And Maya Jennings, standing alone in the storm, could feel the walls of justice closing in like jaws around her. She was halfway through her rebuttal, laying out the inconsistencies in the prosecution's bank statements, when the interruption came. Sharp, cold, deliberate. "That's enough," Judge Leon Whitmore snapped, raising a hand like a monarch silencing a servant. "You're wasting the court's time." Maya froze mid-sentence. "Your Honor, I'm establishing the timeline." "I said that's enough," he repeated, gavel slamming like a gunshot. "You've made your point. Poorly." The murmurs from the audience grew louder, some in disbelief, some amused. But Maya could feel it, all of it, settling into her chest like concrete. At the prosecution table, Marcus Lowell, slick in a $3,000 suit and unearned confidence, leaned back in his chair with a smirk that practically screamed, "I told you she'd crumble." "She's filibustering, Your Honor," Lowell chimed in, voice oozing with condescension. "This isn't a lecture hall. It's a courtroom. Maybe someone should remind Miss Jennings." The jab drew a few chuckles from the gallery. Even one of the jury members cracked a faint smile. Maya scanned the room, hoping, desperately, that at least one person would intervene. Speak up, object. But all she saw were blank faces, some pitying, most indifferent. "I object to this characterization," Maya said, forcing her voice to remain calm. "I'm providing legal context to demonstrate the falsified timestamp on the bank document submitted into evidence." "Miss Jennings," Judge Whitmore interrupted, his tone suddenly dripping with mock patience. "Let me be clear. Since you seem to be struggling with courtroom decorum, I am revoking your right to continue this defense." A collective gasp surged through the courtroom, like a wave crashing against stone. Maya blinked, sure she had misheard. Excuse me?" The judge adjusted his robe, then looked down at her over his reading glasses as if she were a child who had broken a vase. "You are hereby removed as counsel of record for Mr. DeWitt. This court can no longer entertain your efforts given your repeated procedural violations and blatant disrespect for this institution." "Your Honor," Maya said, voice rising now, finally unable to contain the shock. "That's unconstitutional. My client has the right to his chosen representation. You can't just—" "I can," Whitmore growled, "and I just did." Marcus Lowell leaned forward, feigning surprise. "Will, of course, be happy to proceed with court-appointed counsel should the defendant wish to continue his defense." Maya turned to Eric DeWitt, who looked as confused and broken as she felt. His lips moved, but no words came. He looked at her like a man watching his last hope being ripped from his hands by wolves in black robes. "I object." Maya tried again, but the gavel came down harder this time. "You're dismissed." There was no appeal, no review, no further discussion, just a brutal finality, like a door slamming shut in a burning building. Maya's jaw tightened as she gathered her notes. Useless now, nothing more than ashes of effort, and forced herself to stand tall. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of them, not in front of the people who had always believed the courtroom was never meant for someone like her. She turned toward the gallery and the full weight of 100 stares hit her like a flood. Eyes filled with scorn, amusement, pity, that special kind of pity that always wore the mask of superiority. "There she goes," someone whispered. "Didn't last long, did she? Thought she could play with the big boys." She walked the aisle slowly, each step like wading through cement. The silence behind her was deafening, but not complete. Marcus Lowell was laughing, low, smug, satisfied. When she passed the jury box, one juror, an older white man with a sour expression, looked her up and down and gave a slight shake of his head. Disappointment? Number something worse. Disdain. And then came the final humiliation. As she reached the courtroom doors, a voice called out behind her, bright, sarcastic, cruel. "Better luck next time, counselor." The door creaked open, and she stepped out into the hallway, where the world felt too loud and too bright. The buzz of the fluorescent lights, the echo of footsteps, the mechanical hum of the soda machine down the corridor. They all stabbed at her like needles under skin. Her breath came shallow. Her hands shook as she clutched her briefcase to her chest, like armor long since pierced. No one followed her, not even Eric. He was still inside, probably still in shock, probably still wondering how this could happen. But Maya knew. This wasn't about evidence. This wasn't about procedure. This was about erasure. They didn't just want to silence her voice. They wanted to erase her from the narrative entirely. She moved to a bench near the wall and sat down, staring blankly at the marble tile beneath her feet. The marble bench outside the courtroom felt colder than concrete. Maya sat motionless, eyes blank, lips pressed tight. But inside her chest, chaos. Her heart was a war drum, and every beat echoed a memory she couldn't bury. No matter how many degrees she'd earned, or how many suits she wore. Because this wasn't the first time she had watched the system crush a black life under its heel. The first time, it had destroyed her father. Her mind drifted, uninvited, back to the sound of sirens howling through the narrow alleys of her childhood. The South Heights projects didn't have street names, just numbers painted on rusted walls and broken mailboxes. Buildings leaned like drunks, brick cracked open like ribs. The air always smelled of mold, metal, and desperation. Maya was 8 the night it happened. She had been sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring superheroes with a crayon no longer big enough to hold. Her father, Lionel Jennings, was in the kitchen, making grilled cheese sandwiches. The fancy kind, with 2 slices of government cheese instead of 1. He was humming Marvin Gaye. Then the door burst open. The frame splintered. Guns pointed at her father's chest. "On the ground! Hands where I can see them!" Her world flipped. She remembered screaming. Not words, just fear. Her mother had already left months before. Lionel was all she had. He didn't fight, didn't resist. But they tackled him anyway, face pressed into their filthy carpet, knees jammed into his spine. One officer glanced at her and hesitated. The other didn't. "Wrong guy," Lionel said over and over, blood pooling from his mouth. "You got the wrong guy." They never listened. They never do. The charges? Armed robbery. 3 witnesses claimed they saw a tall black man with dreadlocks and a gray hoodie leaving a liquor store with a duffel bag. That was it. No fingerprints, no DNA, no surveillance footage. Just 3 words. He looked familiar. Lionel had never even owned a gray hoodie. The trial lasted 2 days. The verdict came in under 4 hours. Guilty. 20 years. Maya never forgot the way the judge avoided looking at her, how the prosecutor had laughed during recess as if it was just another box checked off. She never forgot how small her father looked in that orange jumpsuit, how he tried to smile for her, but couldn't quite fake it. "You keep your head high, baby girl," he told her through the scratch glass of the visitation booth. "This world will try to tell you who you are. You tell it who you really are." But he never got the chance to finish his sentence. 4 years into his term, Lionel died in prison, stabbed in a laundry room by another inmate. Wrong place, wrong time. Again. The system had chewed him up and spit him out in a box, and no one even said sorry. Maya's world never went back to normal, but she made a promise. To herself, to him, that one day she'd be the woman who could have saved him. She didn't know how. Not yet, but she could read. She could study. While other kids fought over new shoes or candy, Maya hoarded textbooks from the free library bin. She taught herself Latin roots, legal terms, courtroom procedures. She memorized case law by flashlight under moldy ceilings. At 14, she filed her first FOIA request. At 16, she confronted the DA who had prosecuted her father. He didn't even remember the case. "Just another statistic," he muttered. "Exactly. And that's why she would burn the statistics to the ground." Maya clawed her way through college with 3 part-time jobs and 0 safety nets. She slept in buses between shifts, took cold showers at the gym, skipped meals. She didn't care. Law school came next. Every lecture was a weapon. Every textbook was armor. She studied the Constitution like scripture. She cross-examined professors in her head until they couldn't look her in the eye. And when she passed the bar, she didn't celebrate. She cried, not because she was proud, because she knew her father should have lived to see it, but he didn't, because someone decided he looked familiar. Now Maya sat outside another courtroom, stripped of her power, humiliated by the same kind of men who'd destroyed her father. And she realized something terrifying. They hadn't changed, and they never would, unless someone like her made them. She wiped her eyes, stood slowly, and stared at the double doors behind her. Inside, her client, a good man, a black man, was being served up to the wolves. Just like Lionel. The night was already too dark when Maya stepped into her apartment, but the silence made it feel darker. She dropped her bag, kicked off her heels, and walked straight to the whiteboard mounted in her living room. Dozens of sticky notes covered it like scars. Case numbers, dates, bank codes, names, arrows pointing everywhere and nowhere. At the center, circled in red, Eric DeWitt. Innocent? Maya didn't believe in question marks anymore. Not after what she had seen, not after what she had found. 3 days earlier, she had requested the full audit trail on the bank transaction that allegedly linked Eric to the $300,000 embezzlement. The state's primary evidence was a clean PDF of a bank statement submitted by the prosecution, showing Eric authorizing a suspicious transfer at 9:03 p.m. on March 11th. But something didn't add up, so she dug deeper. Maya didn't have access to the raw system logs, but a friend in IT owed her a favor. What she got back sent chills down her spine. The metadata on the PDF showed it was created 3 days before the funds were even reported missing. That meant one thing. The document was fabricated. Someone had planted evidence. Someone had wanted Eric in that courtroom, and Maya was going to find out who. Over the next 48 hours, she barely slept. She cross-referenced employee IDs, internal memos, subpoenaed correspondence from the company Eric worked for, Altrex Capital, and found another crack. A man named Greg Palmer claimed he'd seen Eric tampering with financial logs. His statement was central to the prosecution's narrative. But Palmer didn't appear on any official employee records from the quarter in question. He didn't even exist in the payroll system. No tax ID, no badge registration. Greg Palmer was a ghost, or worse, an actor. She checked social media, hiring databases, LinkedIn, nothing. Then she stumbled across a private Instagram account linked to an off-the-books consulting firm connected to, of all people, Randall Carrington, the CEO of Altrex Capital. The dots began to connect like blood trails on concrete. Carrington had motive, access, and a reason to silence whistleblowers. If Eric had stumbled onto financial misconduct within the company, it would make perfect sense to frame him, remove the problem, control the narrative, keep the machine running. But uncovering the truth came with a cost. The first warning was subtle. A text at 2:37 a.m. Stop digging. He's guilty. You're next. Block number. Encrypted. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. She was used to pushback. Used to threats. But the next one wasn't subtle. The next one almost killed her. That evening, after a 12-hour stretch of research at a downtown library, Maya walked out into the parking garage. It was quiet, too quiet. No music, no footsteps, no voices. She clicked her key fob. The lights on her car blinked. She took one step. The roar of an engine shattered the silence. A black SUV shot from the shadows. No headlights. Maya dove to the side just as the front bumper clipped her hip. She hit the ground, scraping her palms on the concrete. Tires screeched. The SUV vanished into the ramp above, gone before she could even scream. She sat there shaking, bruised, bleeding, and breathing like the world was collapsing on top of her. She called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later, took her statement, looked at the cameras. "Looks like a drunk driver," one officer said, shrugging. "No plates. Probably joyriding." "That wasn't a drunk driver," Maya snapped. "That was an ambush. That was a message." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "Do you have any enemies, ma'am?" She hesitated. Then she said it. "Randall Carrington." Both officers went still, then laughed. "The CEO of Altrex? That Carrington?" "Yes," she said. "He's framing my client. I have evidence." The taller officer raised a hand. "Miss Jennings, you're a defense attorney, not a detective. Maybe you're just under a lot of stress." Maya stared at him, disbelief twisting her insides. "Are you seriously suggesting I imagined getting hit by a vehicle?" "We're just saying," he said, closing his notepad. "Maybe take a step back before this gets out of hand." They left her standing in that parking lot with a torn blazer and blood on her knuckles. The next morning, her mailbox was open. Inside, a manila envelope. No return address. No markings. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single Polaroid. It showed her, standing outside Eric DeWitt's house 2 days ago. The angle was high, distant, taken from a rooftop. The message on the back scrawled in black ink, "We see you." Maya's knees buckled. She dropped the photo like it was a live wire. For the first time in years, fear clawed into her throat like a living thing. Not courtroom fear, not "I might lose this case" fear. Real fear. Fear for her life. Still, she didn't stop. She scanned the photo, checked for fingerprints. Nothing. She had it analyzed for metadata. Useless. Whoever was behind this wasn't sloppy. They were calculating. Powerful. She tried going to the DA's office. The receptionist told her to wait. She sat for 2 hours, no one came out. She emailed a contact at the state bar. No response. She left voicemails for every media outlet in town. Silence. The machine was too big, too loud, too polished, and she was a fly trying to stop a war engine. But that night, staring at her conspiracy wall, one name kept flashing in her mind like a warning siren. Carrington. Randall Carrington had silenced people before. Maya found an old article from 5 years ago about a whistleblower who died in a boating accident. The man had worked in Altrex's compliance department. 2 weeks before he died, he'd filed a report about fraudulent vendor accounts. The file disappeared. No one followed up. History was repeating itself, and Maya knew, if she didn't act fast, Eric DeWitt wouldn't just be convicted. He'd vanish, just like the others. And maybe this time, so would she. The diner was nearly empty, its flickering neon sign casting an eerie glow through the rain-slicked windows. Maya sat in the back booth, hood up, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her eyes never left the door. At 9:46 p.m., a man slipped inside, head down, coat soaked. He moved quickly, cautiously, sliding into the booth across from her without a word. "You're Terrence?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, eyes darting around. "You followed?" "No," she said, though her heart was pounding. "You have it?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive sealed in a clear plastic bag. His hand trembled as he set it on the table. "This could get me killed." Maya took the bag with deliberate care. "Then let's make sure it means something." Terrence exhaled shakily. "It's a recording from a boardroom call. one I wasn't supposed to be on. Carrington was talking about DeWitt, about framing him. Maya's breath caught. They planned it, he continued. The whole thing, the forged statements, the witness, it's all fake. They picked DeWitt because he was easy to silence. Why give this to me? She asked. Because I know what they did to your father, Terrence said, and because no one else will do anything. Maya felt the flash drive burn in her hand. This wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon, dangerous, explosive, and possibly deadly. Don't contact me again, Terrence said. If they find out I helped you. I understand, Maya said softly. He was gone a moment later, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. Back at her office, Maya plugged the flash drive into her laptop with trembling hands. It was encrypted, but a small scrap of paper inside the plastic had the password, Fall Guy 117. She entered it. Inside, one file. Carrington call, audio.mp3. She hit play. The quality was rough, but the voices were clear. Carrington's voice rang through her office, cold, calculating, unfiltered. If DeWitt doesn't back off, we shut him down. Pin it on him. Make the paper trail match. I want it clean. No questions. Another man's voice, nervous. And if someone asks questions? Carrington laughed. Then we bury them. Click. Silence. Maya stared at the screen, stunned. This wasn't conspiracy theory. This was truth. Brutal, raw, and undeniable. She backed it up immediately. One flash drive in her boot, another hidden in a cabinet, a third upload to an encrypted cloud. But even as she moved, a chill crept down her spine. Because now she knew something for certain. She wasn't paranoid. She was being hunted. And this time, she wasn't just defending Eric DeWitt. She was going to war. But just as Maya began to believe the tide was finally turning, just as the truth seemed within reach, the darkness pushed back, harder, colder, and far more vicious than she ever imagined. It happened just after midnight. Maya had just poured herself a second cup of stale coffee, adrenaline still surging from what she'd heard on the recording. Carrington's voice echoed in her head like a curse. Then we bury them. The flash drive was now safely tucked inside her boot, and 2 backup copies sat in her locked cabinet. She knew she didn't have much time. She had to go public fast. But the night had other plans. She heard the first sound at 12:11 a.m., a soft clink of metal, then a second, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the building itself had taken a breath it shouldn't have. Her spine stiffened. She stood slowly listening. Her office, located on the 3rd floor of a nearly abandoned business complex, was usually silent at this hour. But now every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum of electricity felt like a warning. Then the lights cut out. Her laptop screen flickered once, then died. Total darkness. Maya froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The silence was no longer empty. It was charged, thick with danger. Then the crash. Her front door splintered open with brutal force, the sound reverberating through the office like an explosion. She ducked instinctively, scrambling behind her overturned desk. Heavy boots thundered across the hardwood floor. Drawers yanked open. Metal screeched. Papers flew. They weren't just searching, they were hunting. She tried not to breathe. Her heart pounded so loud she was certain they could hear it. A flashlight beam swept across the walls, bouncing off law books and framed degrees, tearing across every corner like a blade. Then a voice, low, muffled, no words, just a grunt. They went straight for the cabinet. Maya's stomach dropped. The lock gave way with one kick. She heard the drive being taken, the soft zip of a bag, the low mutter of success. Then just like that, they were gone. The front door creaked on its hinges, left swinging open like a final insult. For a long moment, Maya didn't move. She waited in the stillness, hoping, begging, that this was some sick hallucination. But when she stood up, the reality was worse than any nightmare. Her office was destroyed, drawers overturned, cabinets ripped open, case files shredded and scattered across the floor like snow. Her desk was broken in two, her laptop smashed into useless fragments. Every photograph, every certificate, every trace of order, violated. And the backups? Gone. She tore through the cabinet with shaking hands, ripped apart every folder, every box, praying for one overlooked drive. But there was nothing. They had taken it all except the one in her boot. She collapsed to the floor, the weight of it all crashing down on her shoulders. For a moment she just sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of her life's work. Then she broke. The sobs came like a storm, violent, unrelenting, from a place too deep to name. She pressed her fist to her eyes as if she could block out what had just happened, as if she could erase the sight of her office in ruins, as if the system hadn't just reached into her world and ripped the truth from her hands. The wreckage still surrounded her, splintered wood, broken glass, torn files, and a silence so heavy it rang in her ears. Maya sat alone in the center of the ruined office, her knees drawn to her chest, eyes glazed with tears that no longer fell. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And somewhere in the darkness, a memory rose, uninvited but undeniable, a memory of loss, of sacrifice, of the exact moment the fire in her almost went out. It started with a phone call, a Tuesday, cold, gray sky. She had just left her criminal law class, still clutching her textbook, notes highlighted in desperate colors. Her phone rang once, twice. Unknown number. "Is this Maya Jennings?" a voice asked. "Yes. We're calling from the state correctional facility. I'm sorry to inform you that—" The rest dissolved. The ground slipped. Her knees buckled. Her father was dead. No warning, no explanation. Just a flat voice on the line reading the end of her world like it was a grocery list. They said it was an accident, inmate altercation, wrong place, wrong time, again. He had always been in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was the story they told when they arrested him. That was the story they fed the jury. And now it was the story they used to close his file forever. She didn't even get to say goodbye. The funeral was quiet. No casket, just ashes in a cheap box. The state didn't pay for funerals of felons, even wrongfully convicted ones. Maya and her mother stood alone under a cracked umbrella, the rain soaking through their shoes. Her mother, Ruth, held her hand with a grip that trembled. "We'll get through this," Ruth whispered. But Maya didn't believe her. She wanted to quit, wanted to burn her books, throw her laptop into the street, disappear into the kind of nothing her father had become. What was the point of studying justice in a world built on injustice? What was the point of learning laws no one followed? She stopped going to class, stopped checking email. For days, she lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, the light above her blinking like a dying pulse. Bills piled up. Notices came and went. She didn't care. Until one night her mother came home from the diner, uniform stained with grease, hands cracked from dishwater. She didn't say anything, just walked to Maya's desk, opened her wallet, and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills. Tip money, singles, and coins. She placed them gently on top of Maya's unread textbook. Maya watched, frozen. Her mother's voice was soft, but it cut deeper than a knife. "I clean floors so you can change the world," she said. "Don't let them win." Then she went to the kitchen and quietly began washing the only pan they had left. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat in front of her books, hands trembling, flipping through pages that once felt like burdens, but now looked like weapons. She stayed up until dawn, reading constitutional case law, rewatching trial footage, memorizing statutes. And when the sun rose, she was still at the desk, eyes red, mind on fire. That was the night Maya Jennings came back to life. But now, years later, as she sat in the ruins of her office, she felt the fire flicker again. The rage and grief she'd buried clawed its way back to the surface. She had spent her entire life climbing out of the pit they'd thrown her father into. Law school hadn't come with scholarships or safety nets. She had worked 3 jobs just to survive: waitressing, tutoring, delivering groceries. She wrote legal essays in parking lots using stolen Wi-Fi, skipped meals, sold her textbooks at the end of each term, praying she wouldn't need them again. And through it all, her mother kept pushing forward, mopping diner floors, scrubbing motel toilets, always smiling when Maya came home, no matter how tired she looked. It had all led to this moment, to Eric DeWitt, to a broken door and a stolen flash drive. And now she was back where she started, on her knees, drowning in injustice. She almost gave up. Again. She almost let it win. But then, from the corner of her destroyed office, she spotted something. A small, dirty object peeking from beneath a pile of shredded documents. Her father's photo, the one she'd framed and set on her desk. Somehow, it had survived. The glass was cracked, the edges bent, but the image was untouched. Her father, Lionel, smiling on the day he helped her move into her dorm. He had worn his best button-down shirt, even though it didn't fit anymore, and brought a plastic bag of snacks he'd saved from commissary. He believed in her, even when no one else did, even when the system stole everything from him. Maya reached for the photo, cradled it like something sacred, and pressed her forehead against it. She wept again, but this time, not just in grief. This time it was fury and fire. "They took everything from us," she whispered, "but I'm still standing." Her father hadn't lived long enough to see justice, but Eric still could, and she wasn't going to stop. Not until the men who ruined lives from behind mahogany desks knew what it felt like to lose. Not until Carrington answered for every lie, every cover-up, every death. Not until the world heard the truth, even if it killed her. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. The knock on Maya's door was sharp, deliberate, and came at 3:12 a.m. She was still awake, of course. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her office was still a disaster zone, but she'd relocated temporarily to a safe house, a cheap apartment with a busted elevator and no neighbors who asked questions. When she opened the door, the man standing on the other side was older, taller than she'd expected, with a gray beard, broad shoulders, and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and regretted most of it. "Carl Bridges," he said, "you've been digging where most people don't survive." Maya hesitated, her instincts on high alert. "I heard you were dead." "Close enough," he said, stepping inside. "They made sure I disappeared after I got too close to Carrington. They didn't kill me. They just shredded my pension, smeared my name, and dumped me into obscurity. And now you're here," she said. "I'm here," he replied, "because I've been waiting for someone else crazy enough to keep fighting." He pulled a black duffel bag onto the table. Inside, laptops, signal jammers, a portable drive with tools Maya couldn't name but instantly trusted. He opened a folder and spread out blueprints. Altrex Capital's downtown data center. "This is where the real story lives," he said. "They don't keep evidence in folders. They keep it buried in encrypted databases, guarded behind 6 layers of firewalls and 2 armed guards. But I know how to get in." Maya stared at the blueprints, heart hammering. "Let's do it." That night, under cover of darkness and adrenaline, they moved like ghosts. Carl had done his homework. Security rotated every 35 minutes. The blind spot between the main gate and utility entrance lasted only 12 seconds. They hit it at 3:47 a.m., slipped through a vent panel behind a recycling chute, and were inside in under 5 minutes. Servers blinked like watchful eyes. They ducked low, moving between cold metal racks until they reached Terminal B. Carl connected the external drive and tapped away, bypassing firewalls like peeling back armor. Maya held her breath. Lines of code raced across the screen. Then, access granted. Carl grinned. "Welcome to the belly of the beast." Inside were payroll documents linking Carrington to offshore accounts, wire transfers disguised as vendor payments, internal memos outlining a strategy to blame a compliant employee for the financial breach. Eric's name was everywhere, planted, manipulated, framed. Then they found the smoking gun, an email chain from Carrington himself. "DeWitt is disposable. If this leaks, we pin it on him. He's the perfect scapegoat. Nobody asks questions when a black man is accused of stealing." Maya felt her hands go cold. They downloaded everything. Gigabytes of evidence. Receipts, charts, personnel logs, internal audits, all tied to laundering schemes, political payoffs, and the orchestrated destruction of one innocent man's life. When they slipped back out into the night, Maya knew there was no going back. She didn't run to the police. She didn't call the courts. She went straight to the people. By 8 a.m., Maya stood in front of the press. Though they hadn't been invited, she live-streamed it from a parking lot rooftop, the skyline of the city rising like a monument to corruption behind her. Her voice was clear, calm, but every word carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights and the ghosts of every innocent person the system had buried. "My name is Maya Jennings," she said, her face pale but her eyes burning. "And today I'm bringing the truth to light." She held up a flash drive. "This contains documents pulled from the servers of Altrex Capital, evidence of widespread financial fraud, money laundering, corporate espionage, and the deliberate framing of an innocent man, Eric DeWitt." Thousands watched online. Within minutes, reporters started appearing. Cameras were pointed, mics held forward. But Maya didn't stop to take questions. She uploaded everything, live to the cloud. She emailed the data to every major news outlet: CNN, the New York Times, Reuters, independent watchdogs, legal networks, human rights organizations. She even sent it to anonymous leak forums, giving the story no single owner. No one could kill it now. "This isn't just about Eric DeWitt," she continued. "This is about every person who's ever been discarded by a system designed to protect the powerful, about every voice silenced behind bars, every truth buried under money." Her phone vibrated in her pocket, calls from unknown numbers. Threats, probably. She didn't answer. "We will not be quiet anymore. If the courts won't listen, the world will." Carl stood just behind her, arms crossed, watching the live stream climb into the hundreds of thousands of viewers. Then millions. The evidence spread like wildfire. Headlines erupted before her live stream even ended. "Whistleblower lawyer exposes billion-dollar conspiracy." "Altrex Capital accused of framing employee in fraud case." "Email leaks show racial bias, political collusion in corporate scandal." The hashtags exploded. #, Justice for Eric, #, Altrex Files, #, Maya Uncovered. The pressure was instantaneous. By noon, the Department of Justice had released a statement promising urgent review of the material presented. That same hour, Carrington's legal team announced he was unavailable for comment. By 2 p.m., his private jet was grounded in New Jersey. By 3:17 p.m., the SEC raided Altrex headquarters. Maya sat on a bench in the back alley behind the rooftop, her body finally shaking from the weight of what she had done. Carl handed her a bottle of water. "You just cracked the ceiling," he said. She looked up, her voice hoarse. "Let's see how hard it shatters." But exposing the truth didn't bring peace. It brought a storm. And in the hours that followed Maya's broadcast, the powerful struck back, with violence, vengeance, and a brutal message. "You went too far." The first blow came without warning. Carl Bridges never made it to the safe house. At 6:12 a.m., just hours after the evidence was released to the world, he was found unconscious in a motel parking lot, blood pooling beneath his temple, ribs cracked, his laptop smashed beside him like an afterthought. No money stolen, no signs of struggle, just precision violence, the kind meant to send a message. Maya got the call while watching her press conference replay on a cracked phone screen. Her stomach twisted as she raced to the hospital, only to find Carl in critical condition, his head wrapped in gauze, breathing through a tube. "They tried to finish what they started 10 years ago," the nurse whispered. Maya stood frozen, fists clenched, pulse pounding like a war drum. "I told the truth," she muttered. "Why does the truth always cost so much?" But it didn't stop there. That afternoon, a warrant was issued for her arrest. The Department of Justice, now under fire, had pivoted hard. The official charge: unauthorized access to a federal-level protected system. The very government she'd exposed was now accusing her of being the criminal. Maya Jennings, civil rights lawyer, whistleblower, daughter of a wrongfully imprisoned man, was now a fugitive. She barely had time to process it when her phone lit up again. It was Rachel DeWitt, Eric's wife. Maya answered, heart racing. Rachel was crying. "They took him," she sobbed. "They took Eric. He didn't even make it home. I got a call. It was a voice I didn't recognize. He said, 'If you don't stop this, they'll send me his body in a box.'" Maya's hands went cold. Her voice trembled. "What did they say exactly?" Rachel's breath hitched. "They told me to tell you." She knows what she took. Tell her to give it back, or we start making people disappear. Maya dropped the phone. This was no longer about data or headlines. This was war, real, bloody, personal, and the enemy didn't hide anymore. They followed her in broad daylight. 3 men in black suits, identical build, sunglasses at night, fake casual. She spotted them near the corner store, then again outside the hospital. One leaned against a black SUV, pretending to talk on the phone, but his eyes never left her. The third time she ran, Maya ducked into a parking garage and bolted toward her car. A black sedan peeled out of nowhere, tailing her with deadly calm. She didn't wait. She jumped in, jammed the key, and the engine roared to life. The moment she pulled onto the street, the sedan followed. She floored it. The chase began. Tires screeched as Maya tore through the city, weaving between traffic, her eyes flicking to the mirror every half second. The black car stayed on her tail like a predator tracking prey. She turned hard onto 5th Street, running a red light, horns blaring behind her. Her heart hammered, breath short, sweat slick on her palms. They were gaining. She took another sharp turn, down a one-way street in the wrong direction. Headlights blazed. Angry drivers swerved. Still, she kept going, adrenaline flooding her system. The sedan didn't hesitate. It followed her into the chaos, engines snarling like a beast. Maya spotted a narrow alley just ahead, barely wide enough for a car. She had one chance. She yanked the wheel. The car swerved, metal kissing brick as she slid into the alleyway. Sparks flew. The side mirror ripped clean off. Behind her, the sedan tried to follow, but miscalculated. It clipped the wall. Too tight. The car slammed into the alley's edge and crunched to a stop. Maya burst out the other side, tires screaming as she shot back onto the open road. Free. For now. She drove 2 more blocks before pulling into an abandoned construction site. She killed the engine, heart still racing, eyes wild. Silence. She sat there in the dark, gripping the wheel, hands trembling. This wasn't just retaliation. This was a full-blown counterattack. They were trying to erase everything. The evidence, the witnesses, even her. They tried to silence her. They failed. Bleeding, hunted, branded a criminal, Maya Jennings had survived the fire. And now she was ready to burn the whole rotten system down with her. In the shadows of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Maya sat hunched over a bank of laptops, her fingers moving with furious precision. Carl was still unconscious. Eric was still missing. And the so-called justice system had labeled her a wanted cybercriminal. So she turned to those who didn't play by the rules. The first message she sent wasn't to the courts or the media. It was to Anonymous. Within minutes, she had a reply. "We've been watching. Upload your data. We'll make sure the world hears it." Maya didn't hesitate. She opened the drive they hadn't found, the encrypted archive Carl had secured before the attack. Inside, a digital tomb of secrets, memos, transcripts, offshore wire transfers, dozens of innocent names, names like Eric's, people of color, immigrants, whistleblowers, all framed, all erased. She uploaded it. At the same time, she contacted global journalists, ones not bought by corporate ads or political favor, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, Al Jazeera, ProPublica. She sent a private signal to a network of human rights attorneys across the US and Europe, people she'd studied from afar for years, people who had gone up against dictators, tech giants, and billion-dollar industries. And now they were listening to her. Within hours, the world moved. Anonymous dropped the first bombshell, a live stream with a masked figure, the voice distorted but deliberate. This is not just about one man. This is not just about one case. This is a system, a machine, designed to destroy lives and profit from pain. The screen behind him lit up with documents, dozens, hundreds, then thousands. Every single one linked back to Altrex Capital. They had done this before. To dozens of black professionals, underpaid employees, and political opponents. They'd used forged records, planted evidence, manipulated bank data, and always walked away clean. Until now, the hashtag number sign Altrex files exploded across the internet. News agencies scrambled. Government officials were blindsided. The DOJ was flooded with public outrage. Protesters flooded the streets of D.C., New York, Chicago, Atlanta. And in every crowd, people carried one name, Maya Jennings. But Maya didn't stop there. She arranged a virtual summit, a bold move for a fugitive. On a secure video call, she appeared alongside top international journalists, civil rights lawyers, and digital security experts. Her face was weary, bruised, but unshaken. "This isn't just about Eric DeWitt," she said. "This is about a corporation weaponizing the justice system, about a government that looks the other way, and about every one of us who could be next." Screens across the globe carried her voice. She walked them through the documents: fraudulent arrest reports, sealed court transcripts, internal emails celebrating successful target neutralization. One memo even described how Carrington had paid off local officials to keep judges quiet. She didn't speak as a victim. She spoke as a warrior. "I'm not asking for sympathy," she said. "I'm demanding accountability." Meanwhile, the FBI, under pressure from both media and international watchdogs, was forced to issue a public statement. "These allegations are serious and will be investigated." But Maya knew better. She didn't wait for justice. She made justice run to catch up with her. The leaks went nuclear. CNN led with a headline that stunned the nation: over 40 wrongful convictions linked to Altrex capital conspiracy. The New York Times followed. Internal emails reveal systemic framing of Black professionals, company executives involved. Across the country, victims began to come forward. A tech consultant wrongfully jailed for wire fraud, a nonprofit accountant accused of embezzlement, a single mother who lost her child after a false drug charge. The pattern was undeniable, and every name, every ruined life was connected to Altrex. America had seen corruption before, but this was different. This wasn't about bribes. It was about strategy, about intention. And Maya Jennings was the woman who cracked it open. Carrington's face was plastered across every screen. His carefully curated empire began to crumble. Sponsors pulled funding. The board suspended operations. A federal grand jury began preliminary hearings. The stock price of Altrex Capital dropped 46% in 2 days. But even as the empire shook, Maya stayed underground. She knew it wasn't over. The men in black suits still searched for her. Threats still buzzed through encrypted messages. Carl remained in a coma. Eric's location was still unknown. And yet she kept fighting. Because now she wasn't fighting alone. International human rights organizations launched formal demands for prosecution. The United Nations Human Rights Council issued a statement condemning systemic manipulation of legal systems for profit. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, all flooded with videos breaking down the scandal. Teenagers, law professors, ex-cops, they were all explaining how Maya Jennings had exposed one of the most dangerous frauds in modern American history. For once, the world wasn't distracted. It was awake, and it was watching. Back in the warehouse, Maya stared at the glowing laptop screen. News feeds pulsed. Her inbox overflowed. Legal offers, protection teams, whistleblower alliances. Even members of Congress were asking for interviews. But she only cared about one thing. Where was Eric? He was still out there. Somewhere. And Maya hadn't gone through all this to leave him behind. As the night deepened, Maya stood and zipped up her coat. She slid the last backup drive into her jacket, checked her burner phone, and pulled the hood over her head. The war had changed, but she wasn't finished. Not until every lie was exposed. Not until every name was cleared. Not until the machine that stole her father, nearly killed Carl, and tried to silence her, was torn apart from the inside. And this time, the whole world was watching her do it. The fall came fast and loud. It began with the raid. At exactly 6:47 a.m., a black SUV convoy stormed through the gates of Carrington's estate. Helicopters thudded above. Federal agents in tactical gear surrounded the mansion, weapons drawn, commands echoing through bullhorns. And in the center of the chaos, Randall Carrington, the man who had once pulled the strings behind boardrooms, prosecutors, and judges, stood barefoot in a silk robe, hands raised, blinking into the blinding light of justice. It was over. Inside his private study, agents uncovered encrypted hard drives, burner phones, offshore account ledgers, and a briefcase with unmarked bills. a survival kit for cowards who knew their time was coming. Carrington didn't speak as they cuffed him. He didn't resist, because deep down, he knew it. Maya had won. The footage of his arrest went viral within minutes. Networks interrupted programming to broadcast it. Headlines screamed across screens, CEO arrested in national conspiracy scandal. Altrex kingpin in custody, corporate collapse underway. But that wasn't the only reckoning. 2 hours later, a press release hit every major news outlet. Effective immediately, Judge Leon Whitmore has submitted his resignation, citing a conflict of conscience. What the statement didn't say was that internal investigations had found records, transcripts of sealed meetings, campaign donations from Altrex-backed shell companies, and communications between Whitmore and Carrington's legal team before multiple trials, including Eric DeWitt's. He had taken orders from a corporation while wearing the robes of the law, and now, like every corrupted pillar Maya had struck, he was crumbling into dust. She read the news from a safe house outside D.C., barely breathing as she watched justice finally begin to unfold. Not as headlines, but as consequences. Carl, still recovering but conscious now, grunted from his cot. "Told you. Roaches scatter when you turn the light on." But Maya didn't smile. Not yet. Not until she saw Eric walk free. And when the day finally came, it hit like a flood. He stepped out of the detention center, flanked by 2 attorneys and 3 U.S. Marshals. A crowd had gathered, holding signs that read, "Free the Framed" and "We Believe Eric." His wife Rachel ran first, throwing her arms around him with a sob that carried months of torment. His daughter followed, grabbing his hand and refusing to let go. Maya watched from a distance, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't want the cameras on her. This moment belonged to them. But the cameras found her anyway. Because by now, Maya Jennings wasn't just a lawyer. She was a symbol of defiance, of truth, of unrelenting, uncomfortable, necessary justice. Reporters shouted questions as she passed. "Maya, how does it feel to take down Altrex? What's next for you? Do you consider yourself a hero?" She didn't stop. She didn't need to answer. The truth was already too loud to ignore. That night, the nation watched as special news segments ran montages of the case. Her first confrontation with Judge Whitmore, the break-in at her office, the leaked documents, the car chase, the press conference that lit the internet on fire. Commentators couldn't agree on what to call her. Whistleblower, activist, outlaw, legend. But to the people who mattered, the wrongfully accused, the mothers who lost sons, the communities silenced by money and power, Maya was something else entirely. Hope. She returned to the courthouse steps the next morning. Not in handcuffs, not in fear, in power. She stood before the building that once tried to crush her and held a simple manila folder, the official request to dismiss the federal hacking charges filed against her. The DOJ had no choice but to comply. They'd lost the moral high ground and the public. A prosecutor tried to speak. Maya cut him off with one sentence. "You can't arrest the truth." Applause erupted around her. But it wasn't about celebration. It was about something deeper, harder, earned. Maya didn't fade into the shadows. She didn't retire. She didn't sell a book deal. Instead, she launched an independent justice initiative, Project Reclaim, designed to investigate wrongful convictions, corporate interference in the legal system, and judicial corruption. She hired the people no one else would. She protected those still waiting for their day in court. And she worked relentlessly to make sure no one else had to live through what she had. Months later, Time magazine released a cover story titled, "The Woman Who Changed Justice in America." On the cover was Maya, standing in front of the Supreme Court, her head held high, eyes unflinching. When asked how she survived it all, she answered simply, "I didn't survive. I fought." But she wasn't finished, because for every Eric DeWitt, there were 10 more still buried. And Maya Jennings had one mission now: dig them up, set them free, and make sure no one ever called injustice legal again. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. The studio lights were blinding, but Maya stood steady. Across from her sat a veteran anchor known for grilling world leaders and exposing corporate lies. The cameras rolled. Millions watched. But Maya wasn't here for applause or redemption. She was here to remind the world that truth still mattered. "You've become a national icon," the anchor said, "a symbol of modern resistance. What do you say to those who call you unstoppable?" Maya's lips curled, not into a smile, but into something sharper. "I didn't win because I'm strong," she said calmly. "I won because I didn't stay silent." The room went still. The anchor paused, leaning forward. "And what kept you from giving up?" Maya looked straight into the camera. Her eyes burned with the weight of everything she had seen. The judges who folded under pressure, the CEOs who treated lives like assets, the jails full of the voiceless. "I remembered what silence costs," she said. "If one person can be silenced, then none of us are truly safe." That single sentence swept across the country like a storm. Clips of the interview flooded every platform. Millions reposted the quote. Protesters etched it onto signs. Law students printed it on t-shirts. One headline read, "Maya Jennings, the woman who refused to shut up." But Maya wasn't done. The next day, cameras returned. But not to a courtroom, not to a riot, not to a press conference. They followed her to a small brick building on the south side of the city. The windows were new. The paint was still drying on the trim. A modest black sign hung above the door. Jennings Legal Initiative, Justice for the Unheard. Reporters jostled for position as Maya approached the door, keys in hand. She wore no makeup, no designer suit, just a black blazer, sleeves rolled, and fire in her stride. She turned to the crowd. "This isn't a victory lap," she said. "It's a battle line." Flashbulbs popped. Microphones pushed closer. She kept going. "Every system that tried to destroy me is still standing. The corporations, the politics, the prisons. So I'm building something stronger." She unlocked the door. The cameras followed her inside. The space was clean but humble. Bare walls, cheap desks, donated chairs. A corkboard listed active cases, evictions, wrongful arrests, deportation threats, wage theft. Names of people no one would ever know. People who still had to fight without the spotlight. At the center of the office was a photo, her father smiling beside a teenage Maya holding her first law book. She reached out and straightened the frame. A soft knock came at the door. The first client, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a stack of unopened eviction notices. Maya opened the door and welcomed her inside. No cameras followed this time, because now the real work was beginning. Over the next week, the office buzzed with urgency. Volunteers showed up in droves. Students, retired lawyers, community organizers. Donations poured in, but so did threats. One morning, an envelope was slid under the door. No return address, just the words, "You should have stayed quiet." Maya didn't even flinch. She taped the note to the wall beside her desk, right next to the Altrex settlement check, now signed over to fund legal aid. If they thought fear could stop her, they had learned nothing. One evening, after a 14-hour day of back-to-back consultations, Maya stood alone in the office, sipping black coffee gone cold. Outside, the streetlights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. She leaned against the window, staring out at the city that had nearly devoured her. She thought of Eric, finally reunited with his daughter, of Carl walking again, of her mother watching proudly from the back of every courtroom Maya had entered since she was 19. She thought of every person who sent her letters, people she'd never meet, who now dared to speak because she had. And she thought of all the silence that still screamed across this country. She turned back to the camera crew, one final segment requested for the evening news. The mic was already clipped to her collar. The red light blinked. Live. She didn't need a script. Maya stared into the lens, steady as ever, and said, "I know what you're thinking, that this is where the story ends." She paused, letting the silence speak for itself. "It's not." Her voice was calm, but behind it, a war drum. "I didn't do this alone. I didn't do this for headlines. I did it because I was tired of hearing my father's name whispered like shame. I did it because the law doesn't belong to corporations. It belongs to people. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And I'm not stopping here. The final words came slow, heavy, and sharp as steel. Because justice is never enough. Fade to black. If this story moved you, if Maya's fight lit a fire in your heart, don't let it end here. Hit that like button to support stories that speak truth to power. Subscribe for more powerful, emotional journeys that expose injustice and celebrate courage. Share this with someone who needs to believe in real justice. Your voice matters. Let's make it louder, together. Like, subscribe, stay brave,